Okay, welcome back to Think Tech. On a given Monday, I'm Jay Fidel, and our first show of the week is Mina, Marco, and me. And guess what? Today we're going global. It's energy going global here at Mina, Marco, and me. And Mina Morita joins us from Kauai. She's former chairwoman of the state PUC, and Marco Mangelsdorf, president of Provision Solar, and the spokesman for HIEC, Hawaii Island Energy Co-op, joins us from, guess where? Shanghai. Welcome, you guys.
Aloha.
Well, a very warm ni hao from Shanghai, and no, I haven't been shanghaied. That's not the reason I'm here. I'm just enjoying one of my favorite megapolises in the entire world.
How's the smog?
It's been so-so. It hasn't been really bad. It hasn't been particularly clear either. So can't complain.
Well, let me tell you, and to start, because you're in Shanghai, there is a piece in the MIT Technology Review about China's efforts in solar. And in 2015, they added 15 gigawatts of new solar. They now have a total of 43 gigawatts of solar capacity, compared with 38 in Germany and 27 in the United States. And it seems that under its current 5-year plan, China will triple the amount of solar capacity by 2020, including adding 15 to 20 gigawatts in each year for the next 5 years. And that will bring the country's installed solar to more than 140 gigawatts. And in context, that means that world solar capacity topped 200 gigawatts last year and is expected to reach 320 gigawatts this year. Okay, and China will have 140 of that. It's pretty good. And the problem, of course, is they still have plenty of coal. And in fact, now they're laying off people in the coal business. And there are protests because China is laying off millions of coal workers. So there's a huge shift going on. What have you heard, Marco? You're there.
Excuse me. Well, you're absolutely right, Jay. One of the things I picked up recently as well is that China not only leads the world when it comes to solar PV and a lot of solar thermal, but leads the world when it comes to wind, development of wind resources. The challenge for the Chinese, oftentimes regarding wind and solar to some extent, is that the high-value wind regions of China are considerably far away, oftentimes from major population areas. So it's very difficult, given that the distances and the lack sometimes of adequate infrastructure to be able to bring all this wonderful renewable energy to market. So there's the challenge of, well, there's lots of wind to the west, but not a whole lot of people. So how do we get that wind energy to the people in the major urban areas who really need it the most? Another thing that struck me just in the past few days reading the press here is that along with the Indians, the Asian Indians, that is, the Chinese are doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on nuclear fission to produce power. And like you alluded to, they're trying to ramp down their CO2 emissions, and coal, of course, has been still the majority supplier of their electricity here in this great country, and they are very, very aggressive when it comes to bringing new nuclear capacity online. They will be, according to their projections, more than doubling their nuclear generating capability within the next 4 years alone, the next 4 years. So it's just stunning. Most of the rest of the world, aside from India and China, are putting the brakes on nuclear, aside from the French, who are big time into nuclear fission for power generation. Most of the rest of the world are either putting the brakes on and or dismantling their plants, whereas you have the two most populous nations on the planet who are doubling and tripling down on more nuclear.
Yes, and I'm telling you guys that I just saw it in the feed this morning. There is a huge, big conference on nuclear energy in Washington, D.C. in the next several weeks. And I think they're going to be coming. The Chinese will be there. The Indians will be there. Certainly the U.S. will be there. And query whether Hawaii will be there. I don't think so. What do you think?
No, we have unless we change our constitution, Hawaii will not be participating.
We're not going to do that. Okay, well, it's great that you're in Shanghai, and it's great that we can talk to you in Shanghai, and we can learn things about what's going on in China. We need to follow everything they do, really. But what about here? Stuff has been going on here, and I would like to talk about the Hawaii Power Conference a couple weeks ago in Maui. Was that as significant as in previous years? Did it cover as much ground? Did it have as many people? There was an article in the paper that indicated that some of the, there was nobody there representing NextEra, and although there were some people from Hawaiian Electric that didn't have the top guys, and so maybe the Maui Power Conference is losing a little energy, no pun intended. Were you guys there? What happened?
I think the absence of NextEra and the lack of any high-level HIEC executive, and you did have a senior VP there. You had Jim Albert, and then you had the other person, Shelly Kumura, who was in charge of the transformation effort. So I think that's such a non-story, because who you had present at the conference are people in the trenches that are dealing with this transformation.
Well, what happened there was what speeches, what was the tone and tenor of the conversation? Was it positive? Was it reluctant? How did it feel to you, Mina?
Well, I thought it was real positive, and I think, conferences in Hawaii have a huge challenge because the issues are getting more complex and more technical, and so there's always this huge challenge on how to format and do the presentations as you deal with more difficult subjects.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, you always have the other challenge of bringing the general public along in this discussion, in order to effectuate transformation.
That's been a problem from the beginning, hasn't it? Because energy is technology and it's complex. And although there's, the people in the industry presumably know about what's going on, the public is always behind, sometimes way behind, and that affects public opinion. It's hard to form good public opinion if the public is not informed. Anyway, what was the takeaway? Do you have any thoughts about what we should know to remember from this conference?
Well, I think David Bissell, the CEO from HIEC, kind of summed it up. It's going to take a lot of capital. It's going to take a lot of land. The focus will primarily be on utility-scale solar to get to 100%, and it's going to be a real challenge as we get into the higher percentages. And so it's going to take a total overhaul of the system.
Yeah.
And key to this is rate design.
Yeah. Where's the money going to come from? Did he say that?
Well, just speaking in terms of HIEC, he said that the cost would be over $1 billion, and just the debt service alone will. Oh, geez, I wish I had it in front of me. Well, I think it's upwards of $50 million a year.
Yeah, that's serious. And that's just Kauai. And if you multiply that out just on a proportionate basis with the population around the state, that's a ton of money for infrastructure. Marco, were you there?
Yes, I was. I was on the final panel that was looking at alternatives to the current situation as far as who owns the utility company, because with the so-called Guernsey report that came out several months ago, that was certainly a topic of conversation. There was a fellow from Boulder, Colorado, who spoke on his city's so far not completely successful efforts at trying to go with the municipal utility there for Boulder, trying to peel it off from Xcel, which is the dominant player in that region. And then I was talking about the co-op model. So it's well, one of the things I'd say, Jay, that is reiterated in my mind is that it's really pretty astounding. It continues to astound me that there is such a high level of interest and enthusiasm and concern as well about energy matters, energy issues here in the state of Hawaii, compared to many other parts of the United States. It's just energy is just way down the list of priorities, whereas it's very high on the list of priorities for people in the state, and that's what makes it such an exciting time.
Yeah, exciting times. That's like a Chinese phrase, isn't it? Interesting times. May you live in interesting times. Speaking of which, after all the trouble that NextEra has had, and lumping that together, with other things like, for example, TMT, and for that matter, there was an interesting letter to the editor in this morning's paper, lumping the zoo together with TMT and saying that people do not appreciate technology here, and the world is finding out, and the investment community is finding out. And if you say that Kauai is going to cost $1 billion, and you multiply that around the state for infrastructure, and if you say that co-ops, for example, like HIEC, they're going to take a lot of money to buy the assets if they can, to establish co-ops around the islands, if that ever happens. Somebody outside the islands is going to have to invest. And I just wonder if you guys have any sense of whether anybody would at this point, because things seem so complex and even fragmented. And for that matter, I wonder whether the Chinese would ever consider coming in and being an investor in our energy after all that has happened.
Well, let me tackle the go ahead, Mina.
No, definitely the investment climate is being affected. And when the commission came out with its inclination, its white paper in 2014, that was looked upon very favorably by the investment community because it lends itself to a certain amount of certainty moving forward with the regulatory agency. But I think at this time, even though the PUC hasn't deviated much from its white paper in looking at a roadmap for the energy picture, the political climate makes the situation uncertain. And this was one of my concerns when I was a legislator, that knowing that there had to be long-term investments coming into Hawaii and big infrastructure investments to be made, it had to go beyond political cycles, whether you're talking a 2-year cycle or a 4-year cycle. And I think now with the term of Commissioner Champley ending and the uncertainty of whether he's going to be reappointed or a totally new person coming in, that makes for further uncertainty with regard to the business climate. So I'm kind of pessimistic right now on how outsiders view us.
Yeah. Marco, what do you think?
Well, I agree with Mina. I think perhaps that's a little bit overplayed, though, in terms of the risk-reward calculation. I'm struck because part of your question was, well, would the Chinese perhaps be interested, or would they keep their substantial holdings and find some other investment opportunity? And I'm struck by a couple of realities that are rather dramatic. One is that Chinese individuals as tourists are record numbers, and the growth rate visiting this country or that country is anywhere year to year is 15, 20, 30, 40% year over year growth. And Second, on the macro level, Chinese companies are also spreading out their cash in a very, very big way because they're extremely cash rich and looking for good opportunities. So what does that mean for Hawaii? Well, one of the things it means is that they purchased a number of feed-in tariff projects on the Big Island, a company called Solar Power International, not to be confused with the annual conference which takes place in the United States called Solar Power International, but this is a Chinese-based company, SPI, and they are owning, they purchased from either Solar Hub and or DEP Hawaii. Some time ago, they purchased these cookie-cutter 250 kilowatt feed-in tariff projects in the south part of the Big Island. So they are, in Hawaii, they are moving forward, trying to move forward with developing solar projects. And some of my colleagues here, my Chinese colleagues, one of the frequent topics of conversation is asking me for investment opportunity advice in terms of the energy realm in Hawaii, which of course is closer to the U.S. than any other part of the U.S. And in terms of geographical distance. So there are more and more Chinese coming to Hawaii. There are more and more folks in the hospitality and the tourist industry who are being trained to speak Mandarin, and I think it's very likely that's gonna continue. So they are very interested in looking for investment opportunities in Hawaii in the energy realm, whether that's utility scale solar or perhaps, and given that's probably a good segue into the Sun Edison story maybe after this topic.
Yeah.
Utility scale solar, but also looking at means to help utility companies, especially our utility companies, to smooth out the intermittency of renewable energy in terms of grid stability. So they're very interested in what they can do and what they can bring in terms of investment to try to be a player in the Hawaii energy game.
Yeah, it's a great strategic investment. I'm sure the PRC likes it as a political or global relations matter. And there are three top, I don't know if you've ever talked to them or you're talking to them now, but there are three top producers that are all candidates to invest in Hawaii solar. They are the three top solar producers in China. One is JA Solar, one is Jinko Solar, and the other is Trina Solar, as well as the international company you mentioned. Anyway, let's take a short break. We'll be right back here on Mina, Marco, and me, talking about energy going global. And at that point, we'll talk about the Sun Edison update. We'll be right back.
Aloha, I'm Keli'i Akina with the Grassroots Institute of Hawaii, and one of our delights is to be partnered with Think Tech Hawaii and produce programs every week. Every Monday at 2 o'clock, we have a show called E Hana Kako, which means let's work together. So we bring people from all across the nation and the country, and certainly throughout the islands together here to talk with them about how to work together, and how to work together to do the following: to build a better economy, a better government, a better society. So if you're interested in the research of our think tank, the Grassroots Institute, or if you're interested in how that's applied at the governmental and community and business levels, you'll enjoy the fascinating conversations with our guests on E Hana Kako every week on Think Tech Hawaii at 2 o'clock on Mondays. Until our next show, I'll see you. Aloha.
3, 2, 1. Okay, we're back. We're live here on Mina, Marco, and me, our first show of the week at 12 o'clock rock on a Monday. And we're talking about energy going global. And we've really had an interesting discussion about what's going on in solar. But let's continue that for a minute and talk about Sun Edison. Sun Edison with the crashing problems and failures and whatnot, and HIEC terminating their contracts, their projects, multi-million-dollar projects, in which hundreds of millions have already been invested. Lots of criticism of HIEC for terminating, lots of defense from HIEC. There was a piece in the paper last week where HIEC roundly defended itself from that criticism. So where are we now? Is Sun Edison doing better or worse? What is the likely outcome of all this?
Well, I guess the latest is, Sun Edison hasn't filed its annual financial reports with the SEC, and looks like they're having problems putting together their financial reports. But if they fail to file the report by March 30th, it may be in default of 1.4 billion in loans and in a technical default. So it's got some deadlines it has to meet, or some negotiating that it has to do with its lenders for being technical default.
So, Mina, do you agree with HIECO's action in terminating them? It certainly seems that this could have been a real dangerous path for HIECO to continue down the track with a company that's coming apart.
Sure. The thing is that they didn't meet milestones, and when they didn't meet their contractual milestones, HIECO had to act on it, or it gets waived. And so, given the financial situation of SunEdison, had they not dealt with the contractual matters, they may have ended up with projects that were in bankruptcy that would probably take a long time getting settled and would take up capacity on the grid.
Yeah, let us not forget, though, that there's a 60-day voidable preference period. And if they go bankrupt within 60 days of the original termination, that termination can be reversed in the bankruptcy court. So we're not out of the woods on...
I think, again, this is HIECO's contractual agreement with SunEdison, and so I think they had good reasons to terminate, and they have to protect their own interests and the interests of ratepayers here.
Yeah.
To avoid getting caught up in bankruptcy.
Yeah. It's complex for sure. The road to 100% renewables is a difficult road on so many levels.
No, and the thing is, the contract wasn't awarded to SunEdison. It was actually awarded to First Wind. And SunEdison bought out First Wind. So that's how it ended up with the contract.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Marco, you've been following this. What are your thoughts?
It's certainly a sticky wicket, Jay, and there's been some interesting dialogue between the D.E. Shaw Group, which SunEdison has agreed to sell their interest, lock, stock, and PV project, these three projects on Oahu, to the D.E. Shaw Group. And
where is D.E. Shaw located?
They're back somewhere in the Midwest, aren't they, Mina?
I don't know. There's somehow they're affiliated with some university investment fund too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's back in the Midwest. Well, they wrote a letter to Alan, president of HIECO, Alan Oshima, a couple weeks ago when Mina and I were at the conference, essentially, I won't say begging and pleading, but urging HIECO to reconsider and vowing to address whatever issues and concerns that Hawaiian Electric has regarding moving forward with these three projects. And Alan responded, and this is all part of the public record on the docket. Alan responded last week, somewhat cautiously, and saying, well, if you can meet our concerns, then we'd like to move forward. But to what extent the D.E. Shaw Group can meet all the concerns and the risks and liabilities that Hawaiian Electric feels that they would be taking on if they were to agree to move forward and minimize the possibility that these three projects would get caught in the throw net of a possible filing for bankruptcy of SunEdison. So I'm not privy, certainly, to Alan's determinations an ultimate decision, but I can certainly understand both points of view, and I think it's going to come down ultimately to whether Hawaiian Electric feels that the risk is manageable and not too scary, essentially. But how it's going to play out, as we're kind of running out of time to be able to move forward with these projects, I just don't know.
Well, this takes us to the whole thing about whether these big PV companies, American PV companies, are making any money. And I forget where I saw this. Maybe it was in something that that you sent me, Marco. But I guess the question before the House is, we thought that PV would be a profitable business on a national level. These PV projects would be, profitable to large companies, even big board companies. But that hasn't worked out, has it?
No, it hasn't, Jay, and that's one of the things that I'm most dismayed and struck by, I guess, being in this business as long as I have, which is that the law of the jungle in terms of for-profit companies like mine and thousands, millions of other for-profit companies around the world is that if you're not profitable, you don't stay in business. You exit the playing field. And that does not apply, however, to a very, very small minority of businesses where profitability means nothing or can mean very little for years and years, if not longer than years and years. And in the renewable energy business, in terms of solar development companies and finance companies, as far as I know, the big four, Sun Edison is a larger conglomerate that's not just PV. But they haven't been profitable, I believe, in 5 years, and they're knocking at the door essentially in terms of insolvency and bankruptcy filings. And then you have Solar City, Sunrun, and Vivint, all based in the U.S. as well. And none of those companies, to my knowledge, has ever been profitable, never been profitable. And the combined losses in last year for Solar City, Sunrun, and Vivint was somewhere in the $1.2, $1.3 billion range, and that doesn't even include Sun Edison. We don't even know how much money Sun Edison lost last year because they've delayed their filings for their financial report. So what is wrong with it?
Doesn't this suggest that we have that the model is wrong? That we want to build all this PV for a long time in terms of volume, not profit. Mainland companies were doing gangbuster business in Hawaii, but over time, inevitably this model can't work if they're all losing money. What are we going to do? We have to change the model. Mina, do you have any ideas about this? Should government step in some way?
The problem is government has already stepped in Hawaii with the tax credits, and then again, prior to the PUC October ruling with the NEM rate. So it was highly profitable, I put profitable in quotes for these companies because they were highly subsidized in pushing their third-party ownership business model. And with Hawaii's high rates. And so back to your question, should government step in? Government and regulations didn't react quick enough to the problem, which ended up in a market being highly subsidized. Now we're trying to make all the corrections here, and corrections with a grid that's quickly reaching capacity.
Yeah, and the local providers are not doing very well in terms of getting new contracts. Where did I see that the number that since NEM was terminated, was 6 months ago, the number of installations has dropped precipitously among the solar industry. So I think we have a systemic problem. Marco,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts about that?
Well, one of the things that's been striking to me, Jay, still kind of staying on the macro level, is that one can, I think, observe that the solar industry writ large has had some of the best incentives that they're likely to ever enjoy. Incentives in terms of net energy metering, which has been, albeit ramping down in some parts of the country, but more particularly in terms of tax credits, federal tax credits, and oftentimes state tax credits like we have in the state of Hawaii. So it's been heavily incentivized. These major companies that are doing hundreds of millions of dollars of business per quarter, they have been benefiting, as my company has benefited, and homeowners and businesses have benefited from these tax credits. And how is it that they're still losing such incredible amounts of money, even though they are getting the best possible incentives, realistically, politically, that they're probably likely to enjoy? So, I mean, what's wrong with that picture? They're getting all these incentives, and they're still not making money. And to go from the macro to the state level, as you just mentioned a few moments ago, you're absolutely right. I mean, I've been watching this data very carefully for the past years, of course, and also for the past few months. And I mean, I'm seeing this train wreck unfolding before our eyes, where net energy metering being ended in October. It's been a tough 4 months for the whole industry, and Katie Mickleseth wrote a piece yesterday in the Star Advertiser looking at how local solar companies are cutting back, are reducing staff, are Solar City is sending some other staff to the mainland.
Substantial reductions, large reductions.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, Mina, what do we do? What can the PUC do?
Well, I think, they're headed down the right track where okay, they ended the NEM program. They're in a transition mode. They're looking at rate design. And, they are telling the solar installers, you got to design with more value to your customers. So, I don't see it as a ending of the market. It's just the retooling of the market to bring more value to the grid and to their customers.
We only have a few minutes left, and I would like to cover what's been going on in the legislature, because there have been a number of bills, some more likely, some less likely to succeed. But can we talk about that for a minute? We've talked about the NEM. There's a bill in the legislature to extend it. What was the chance of that succeeding, and will it have the desired effect?
Well, it looks like the bill did not cross over. This was originated in Representative Chris Lee's committee, the Energy and Environment Committee, which is Mina's longtime committee as chair for years and years. And that did not make it didn't make it past the second committee, which was the Consumer Affairs, Consumer Protection Committee, Angus McKelvey's committee. So it did not cross over. The first port of call would have been Senator Lorena Noe's Energy and Transportation Committee on the Senate side, and I don't think she would have even given it a hearing anyway. So efforts to extend NEM, to revivify NEM on the legislative side are dead, from what I can tell.
Well, that's not a bad thing, in the sense that, the legislature ought to leave the PUC alone and stop double thinking it. Don't you agree?
Well, there's obviously two minds, and I'm sure Mina would like to chime in on this as well, where you've got some legislators who feel perfectly comfortable with stepping on the toes and getting more involved in the regulatory process, and other legislators who feel, hey, this is just not our business. Let the PUC do their job.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mina?
Yeah, one of the things that concern me about the legislative session is that there's so much happening at the PUC right now, and there's so many big picture stuff happening at the PUC right now, that a lot of the bills were sort of reactionary to the PUC's decision, contrary to the PUC's decision, or just had what people may think are little fixes that may have inadvertent consequences. So I'm looking forward to the legislature ending session. So we don't have to.
What do they say when the legislature is in session? Blah, 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 blah. Something about no man's life or property is safe.
Yeah, so I mean, it's been a scary session. I think we've had some discussions about the bill about substantial net benefits, and so there was a bill moving on that. And the irony here is it was supposed to address the NextEra merger application, and by setting a higher standard for merger acquisition. But you have a amendment on the books that changes the standard. It also affects a cooperative like HIEC, which requires them, to have substantial net benefits as opposed to fit, willing, and able as the standard.
Yeah, and it does raise the question of whether the legislature can change a standard that existed when HIEC and NextEra made their agreement, and when the whole thing started in the PUC. Can you change it after the fact? It all sounds like ex post facto to me. It may not be appropriate.
So the retroactivity of such a law was a huge concern because, some people said that it was unconstitutional. But I leave that up to the lawyers. But, but definitely when you change the standard, you'd be affecting future acquisitions.
Yeah. Well, to add to that discussion, yes, we have a bill for special purpose revenue bonds for the very same HIEC. That's Marco's company. How's that doing, and what's its purpose and effect?
Well, just one point of clarification. This special purpose revenue bond is not specifically targeted or specific to Hawaii Island Energy Cooperative. It's to energy co-ops in general. So we're not specifically named, and it did pass the House. It passed the House and was submitted to the Senate. And I don't recall whether it's. I'd have to go and look online. I believe it. Yeah, in fact, it did. It did pass Lorraine Inouye and Roz Baker's joint committee session or a meeting a week or two ago, and has been referred to the WAM, the Ways and Means Committee. So it is moving forward, and I'm hopeful that the WAM will pass it as well, and then would go for a floor vote. And so far it's passed unamended, so it wouldn't have to go back to the House, from what I understand. So, anything that's supportive of our efforts, we're certainly very appreciative of, if and when, again, fall back to the reality that we need a willing seller. Up to date, there has been no willing seller because the merger has still been in play, and hopefully in the months to come there will be a decision one way or the other on the merger, and we'll kind of see where get the lay of the land at that point.
Yeah, what I hear you saying is that during the merger process right now, and presumably until June when the PUC might rule, probably will rule, this is not a time for any co-op to do much in terms of changing the business model of any island. But after that, and certainly would depend on whether the deal is approved or not, after that, I have a feeling you'll be very busy, Marco.
Well, I'm not one to kiss and tell, Jay. So the game is still afoot, and we've, I think, done a very good job over the past year in terms of raising the profile of the co-op model, and certainly we've been enormously supportive, and we're very grateful for the support of Kauai Island Utility Co-op, which is, again, remind everybody the only true working electric co-op, energy co-op in the state of Hawaii, that they've been doing I think, a superlative job over the years in so many different respects. So we'll see how this merger thing plays out. And like we were talking about earlier, there was a piece in the Civil Beat just posted in the past 24 hours by Nathan Eagle looking at what the governor may or may not do, excuse me, regarding Michael Champley, whose term is up on the as of the 30th of June. So, and I just kind of go back to the multidimensional nature of the chessboard here in terms of energy. On it's just so interesting and so exciting on so many different levels.
Agreed. It's a good picture of him, though, wasn't it? He looked terrific in that picture. All that nice guy aspect of him came out. But I wonder, just wrapping up on what you were just saying, if his term up before the June decision of the PUC or after?
Well, and keep in mind that. Oh, go ahead, Nina.
His term ends on June 30th.
Why do I feel they will decide by June 30th? That's what I feel.
Yeah, that's the prerogative of the PUC. You don't know when they're going to decide.
Yeah.
I mean, all we know is the decision will be made after all the final briefs are filed, the final arguments are filed.
Is there enough happening here, honestly? It's not a matrix of issues. It's a three-dimensional matrix of issues, as you said, Marco.
Well, keep in mind, guys, that on or before June 3rd, the parties will have to make a decision. The applicants will have to make a decision, HEI and Xterra, whether to extend the term of the agreement, because the 6-month extension, which they agreed to December 3rd of last year, the 6-month extension ends June 3rd.
Yeah.
And will they extend for another 6 months or not? And I'm not privy to that internal deliberation, but it's a very important question they're going to have to answer. And if they do decide to extend, then is it likely that this commission would come to a decision sometime between June 3rd and June 30th? I think, if anything, Randy Iwase has made clear that they will work according to their own timetable, and damn the torpedoes and whatever anybody else says. We'll take as long as we need, and we're not bound by any other deadlines.
Wow. Is there enough complexity? I am sorry, you guys, but we'll have to leave it there. We're out of time. But I want to pick it up as soon as possible. 2 weeks from today would be a great opportunity. I'm sure that other amazing things will happen in that period. And Mina, we'll catch you wherever you are. And Marco, the same to you. And we'll do Mina, Marco, and me once again and look deeply into this unfolding historical process of renewable energy in Hawaii. Thank you so much, you guys.
Well, my great pleasure. Thank you to the two of you.
She.
Yeah.
Sight.